I've always been one to enjoy a good dinner party. The atmosphere, the laughter, the food, and the company, it's all part of what makes a gathering with friends so special. So when I received an invitation to a dinner party at my friend Michael's place, I was more than happy to attend. The invitation came with a casual message: "Come over around dusk. We're going to have a great time. Don't be late." I knew Michael's neighborhood well. It was one of those older, quiet parts of town where the streets are lined with trees and the houses have character, each one different from the next. The streets there are somewhat confusing, with similar names that can easily trip you up if you're not paying attention. But I had been to Michael's place before, so I wasn't too concerned about finding it again. That evening, I left my apartment around dusk, the sky a mix of deep blue and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was cool, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves on the trees as I drove through the neighborhood. The streets were nearly empty, just a few cars parked along the curbs, the houses bathed in the soft glow of porch lights. As I turned onto what I thought was Michael's street, I slowed down, looking for his house. The neighborhood had a certain charm at night, the shadows playing tricks on the eyes, but I wasn't worried. I knew I was in the right area. The houses all looked familiar, and it wasn't long before I spotted what I believed to be Michael's place, a large 2-story house with a wide front porch and a soft light glowing through the windows. I parked the car and stepped out, taking a moment to appreciate the calm of the evening. The street was quiet, almost too quiet, with only the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere in the background. I grabbed the bottle of wine I had brought and headed up the walkway to the front door. As I approached, I noticed something strange. The house was lit up inside, but there were no cars in the driveway. No signs of life. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe everyone had parked around the back or something. When I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment. The door was slightly ajar, not enough to see inside, but enough to make me pause. I knocked, the sound echoing through the house. There was no answer. I knocked again, a little louder this time, but still nothing. That's when I noticed the faint smell of something cooking, a savory scent that drifted through the door. It was enough to make my stomach growl. I pushed the door open a little further and called out, "Hello? Michael? Anyone home?" No response. The house was eerily silent, but the smell of food was stronger now, almost as if it were beckoning me inside. I took a cautious step over the threshold, my eyes adjusting to the dim light inside. The first thing I saw was the dining room, just off the entrance hall. The table was set, candles flickering, plates and silverware arranged perfectly, as if waiting for guests to arrive. But there was no one there. I frowned, confusion washing over me. This was Michael's house, wasn't it? Everything looked right. The layout, the furniture, the pictures on the walls. But where was everyone? I checked the time on my phone. I wasn't early, maybe just a few minutes ahead of schedule. Still, it was odd that no one was around. I stepped further into the house, the door creaking as it swung shut behind me. The sound made me jump, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. The silence was oppressive now, the only noise, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I walked slowly through the house, calling out again, "Michael? Where are you guys?" The kitchen was empty, the stove still warm, a pot of something bubbling gently on the burner. It was as whoever had been cooking had just stepped out for a moment. But the longer I stood there, the more uneasy I felt. The house felt wrong, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I turned back toward the front of the house, ready to leave and wait outside until someone showed up when I heard it, a faint whisper coming from one of the back rooms. I froze, straining to hear. The whispering continued, low and unintelligible, but definitely there. My skin prickled with unease, my instincts screaming at me to get out of there. I forced myself to move, inching toward the hallway that led to the bedrooms. The whispering grew louder, still too quiet to make out, but now I could hear multiple voices, as if several people were speaking at once. But something about the voices wasn't right. They sounded wrong, distorted, like a recording played at the wrong speed. I stopped at the doorway to one of the rooms, the door slightly ajar. The voices were coming from inside, and they were clearer now. I could hear fragments of words, phrases that didn't make sense, a disjointed conversation that sent a chill down my spine. I reached out, my hand trembling as I pushed the door open. The room was empty. No people, no source for the voices, but they were still there, filling the room with their eerie whispers. My heart was racing now, fear clawing at my throat. I backed away, my mind reeling. This wasn't right. None of this was right. That's when I saw it, the address on the wall just outside the room. A small plaque, engraved with the house number. But it wasn't Michael's address. It was close, just one digit off, but not the right house. My blood ran cold as the realization hit me. I was in the wrong house. I turned and bolted for the front door, the whispers growing louder, more frantic, as if whatever was in the house knew I was leaving. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I was outside, the cool night air hitting me like a splash of water. I stumbled down the steps, nearly dropping the bottle of wine as I fumbled for my car keys. As I drove away, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The house was dark now, the lights inside gone out. But just as I turned the corner, I thought I saw movement in one of the windows, a shadowy figure watching me leave. I didn't stop driving until I was several blocks away, the adrenaline still pumping through my veins. When I finally parked, I sat there for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. I pulled out my phone and checked the address Michael had sent me. Sure enough, it was one street over from where I had been. I had gotten the street names mixed up, led by the eerie coincidence of the similar addresses. I considered going to the actual dinner party, but I couldn't bring myself to go back. Not after what just happened. I texted Michael, making some excuse about feeling unwell and heading home. He replied with concern, asking if everything was okay, but I just told him we'd catch up later. The next day, I met up with Michael and a few other friends for lunch. They were all full of stories from the night before, laughing and teasing me for missing out on what they claimed was an amazing dinner. I tried to play along, but the experience from the previous night weighed heavily on my mind. At one point, Michael leaned over and asked, "Seriously though, why didn't you show up?" "We were waiting for you." I hesitated, the memory of those whispers still fresh in my mind. "I got lost," I said finally, forcing a laugh. "Ended up at the wrong house." Michael raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, the wrong house?" I told him about the mix-up with the addresses, how I had gone to a similar-looking house on the wrong street. I left out the part about the whispers, about the overwhelming feeling of dread that had driven me to flee. When I finished, Michael frowned, glancing at the others. "Are you sure you were at the wrong house?" he asked slowly. "Because that sounds a lot like the old Harris place. It's been abandoned for years. No one's lived there since the accident." A chill ran down my spine as I looked at him, my heart skipping a beat. "Accident?" Michael nodded, his expression serious. "Yeah, back in the 90s. The whole family died in a car crash on their way to a dinner party. The house has been empty ever since." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I hadn't imagined it. The voices, the whispers, they were real. And I had walked right into their home, uninvited. I tried to laugh it off, but inside, I knew I would never forget that night. Never forget the feeling of those eyes watching me as I fled. To this day, I avoid that part of town. I don't care if it's just a coincidence or if there's something more to it. All I know is that I was lucky to get out of that house, and I'm not going back to find out what I left behind.